What's up guys, Tommy Bowyer here from Movie Rewind, and today I will be counting down the top 10 Casualty episodes. So without further ado, let's get into it. There have been over 1,000 episodes of Casualty since it started airing in 1986, so this video, to narrow it down to just 10, was incredibly stressful and difficult to do. But to be fair, this is a video I've wanted to do in a while, but I thought I'd set up some ground rules before we get into the actual ranking. Firstly, I've only watched Casualty since 2007, so don't expect any episodes which aired before then to be on this list. Secondly, this is my opinion. I'm very biased, and some of this list is based on nostalgia, so please keep that in mind. And thirdly, if you haven't seen many episodes of Casualty, I would say don't watch this video because there's going to be heavy spoilers for the episodes I'm going to be talking about in this video. Now, with all that being said, let's get on with the ranking. At number 10, I have Dawn of the ED, which is the opening two-parter to Series 24. And this is an episode I really enjoy because of the stunt work involved. It really revolves around a fire at an abandoned mall, and a number of the Casualty regulars get caught up in this fire, and you're on the edge of your seat throughout because you really don't want any of these characters to die. As I said, all of the stunt work, all of the set design is really strong in this episode. It really has an intensity which gets Series 24 off to a really strong start, and of course it ends with the tragic death of Junior Dr. Heather. Now, Heather only appears in this opening two-parter, but she's set up as a new regular character, and you begin to like her. You know, she's a junior doctor, she's very eager, but she's also very nervous, and kind of Consultant Adam takes her under her wing, and then her death is so sad because she dies in a very brutal way. I've never forgotten her death scenes, and a burning elevator falls on her and she plunges to her death, and that was just devastating. I still remember that to this day. So I really like Dawn of the ED. It felt like a great start to Series 24, and the stunt work involved was just remarkable. Duty of Care, Series 26, Episode 17. It's the first episode set in Cardiff, so of course it was a feature-length episode, and it's quite exciting seeing the new Casualty set. It looks all new and modern, and you can just see all of the actors are just loving the new set, so that's really enjoyable. But this episode revolves around a motorway pile-up, which then creates a gas leak and explosion, and there is some beautiful shots in this episode, especially when Registrar Sam Nichols is running around areas of Holby which the gas leak is affecting, and you can see this massive gas cloud in an abandoned urban area, and I don't know why, but those shots are just beautiful because it really does add to the feel of tension in this episode. I really like Duty of Care. We're introduced to new Registrar Tom Kent. He's a really enjoyable character as well, and he helps out a lot during this episode, so that was great to see. This is an episode in which every member of the ED team is involved. You feel like they all have a role, so I really do enjoy this episode. It's a good episode, I would say, for new Casualty viewers because it does feel like a new era, especially as it's the first episode set in Cardiff. A Child's Heart, which is the opening two-parter to Series 30, and I remember really looking forward to this two-parter, I think because the marketing was very good, and plus the Series 29 finale, in which it was the aftermath of Max and Zoe's wedding, and Zoe and Dylan were on the boat and the boat blew up. That was just a really good cliffhanger. And Series 30 continues that edge of your seat tension. You're kind of wondering if Zoe's going to survive because she has hypothermia. And also it's an episode which really centres heavily on Charlie, which I think is a good thing. Charlie is, of course, the last remaining member of the original Casualty characters to appear since 1986. So I was glad that this two-parter kind of follows Charlie's journey and how he started off as a nurse, as well as the relationship he had with his father, which you can see from watching this episode was not very good. It weren't a healthy relationship. Charlie collapses from a heart attack during this episode, and honestly, there is a part of the way through the second part of this storyline, I thought they were going to kill off Charlie. I was convinced that Charlie was going to be killed off. They didn't kill Charlie off. He is saved in the end. But the fact that this episode gets you to the point where you are giving up hope on Charlie just shows what an interesting episode this is. I mean, you're kept invested throughout. I really do like A Child's Heart. I think it's a really great episode. It was a great way to start off series 30. Plus, Duffy returned as well for a couple of episodes, which was really good to see as well. Before a Fall, series 22, episode 24. We're going way back to 2008, and this is a storyline which has really stuck with me, and it is the episode where Junior Doctor Ruth Winters, who's been struggling with her mental health for some months, decides to try and take her own life. So it's an attempted suicide storyline. And this episode is hard to watch, but I think that's what's good about it, because of course suicide is a subject which people don't like talking about. And this episode really shines how when someone is struggling, sometimes even the people they're working with day in, day out will just not notice. I love the character of Ruth anyway, so this is an episode that I really enjoy watching. I think it's a very important episode as well, especially the scene in which they find Ruth hanging in her bedroom and she's brought into the ED. It's a beautiful silent shot where there's this music playing and we just see all the ET team trying to desperately save her life. And I also love how we have clinical lead Harry Harper in the aftermath of her attempted suicide basically saying to Tess that the system failed her. And I always thought that was a great scene because it shows that sometimes there's so much stress on junior doctors and hospitals don't do enough to protect them and support them. So I've always adored this episode. I think it's a very important episode which people should watch. Born Lucky, series 29, episode 5, otherwise known as the episode which of course has Jeff Collier's death in it. And this episode is intense as well as heartbreaking. I remember watching this episode like it was yesterday. Obviously, the edge of your seat tension over which characters are going to survive this minibus crash. And of course, Jeff's tragic death. If any of you have watched my top 5 casualty death videos, you will know Jeff appeared on that list. And it was just so heartbreaking. He was about to marry Tamsin Bale, who I would say is probably the love of his life. And then to be tragically killed off, he managed to get everyone else out of that minibus except himself. And the ending of this episode is so emotional. And I tear up to this day when Tamsin is just asking Dixie, where is he? Just go and find him. Where is he? And it's hard to watch, but it is a bloody good episode. So Born Lucky, yeah, it's an amazing episode. It really is. We're halfway on the list and I have chosen Place of Safety, series 25, episode 23. Now I said I like episodes with a lot of stunt work, but this episode is a great character assessment on the character of Ruth Winters. Now Ruth had been suffering in the months prior to this episode with her mental health, and she eventually had a complete mental breakdown, which we eventually learn is bipolar disorder. And this episode is primarily set in a psychiatric ward, and Ruth is being looked after by Charlie, and Charlie's trying to make her see that she is mentally unwell and that she needs to get support. And I just thought it was a great character assessment of Ruth, and also with people who do suffer breakdowns and have health concerns with bipolar disorder, how they can deny that they do have a problem and how they eventually have to come round to the idea that what they're doing isn't right. So I really do like this episode. It just focuses on Ruth throughout. You see her journey, and it's great by the end of this episode that she finally accepts health and starts to become the Ruth Winters that everyone knows and loves. So yeah, I really like this episode. It's a great character study on a very complex character of Ruth Winters. A Day in a Life, series 24, episode 18. This was the first episode to air in 2010, so they started off the new decade with a bang. This episode revolves around consultant Adam Truman and nurse Jessica Harrison getting married, and then they are involved in a massive car accident in which they end up on a frozen lake. Now the stunt work involved in the lake scenes and the car being submerged in the icy water is a really great scene. That's some great stunt work. I think it was nominated actually for an award, but don't quote me on that. Plus this episode has a lot of emotion as well, because of course while Adam and Jessica survive, their young son Harry, who is less than a year old, ends up dying. And that is a really emotional death scene. Tristan Jamal as Adam Truman kills it throughout this episode, because Adam is a character who is usually very confident. We've never really seen him vulnerable before, but in this episode, obviously with the death of his son, he just emotionally breaks down. And that was really difficult to watch. But this episode, it was a great way to start off the 2010s. A lot of intensity as well as emotional moments, which make for a perfect episode of Casualty to watch. We're into the top 3 now, and I've chosen Too Old for This Shift. That's Series 31, Episode 1, Casualty's 30th anniversary. And I remember Charles Venn nicknaming this episode before it aired as Casualty the Movie. And that really is what this episode is. I mean, it even had its own soundtrack made by the BBC. So that just shows how much care and attention was put into this episode. But this episode really is strong. I like the idea of them celebrating Charlie's 30 years of nursing, because especially as a lot of old cast members and characters return to kind of leave a video message for Charlie. And that was a really interesting idea, because you can have a lot of characters make cameo appearances, kind of giving their opinions on Charlie. So I thought that was a neat idea to have some good cameos. The majority of this episode is about the helicopter crash, which involves consultant Connie Beecham's young daughter Grace. The helicopter crash itself is really good. It's good, impressive stunt work. And of course you are concerned about every character, because of every character could be a victim. Now, actually no one dies in this episode, which I remember some people getting annoyed about, because they thought, oh, it's a massive episode of Casualty, we deserved a death. But I don't think we do, because what this episode was about was showing how the ED can come together. Every single character in this episode feels like they have a purpose throughout, and it's great. One of my favourite scenes from this episode is seeing Charlie, Duffy and old paramedic Josh stand up to Jacob when Jacob's kind of going on one, and they're like, no, we're the experienced medics in this place, you will listen to us. And I just felt that was a great scene, which kind of celebrates the older characters of Casualty. So Too Old for This Shift was a really special episode. It had really strong viewing figures from what I remember. It had like over 7 million people watching. I really liked this episode. It was the perfect way to celebrate 30 years on screen. In second place, the runner-up is Series 35, Episode 1, commonly referred to as the COVID episode. Now, Casualty had been off air for several months before this episode aired. But this episode was fantastic. So much care and attention put into it. I think it perfectly summed up how hard emergency departments had it during COVID. I mean, this episode went through everything. From the lack of PPE to patients not taking COVID seriously to staff and friends coming down with this deadly disease. It was a fantastic episode. The acting from all of the cast, but especially Amanda Mealing, was exceptional. I mean, it often is, but this was just another level. And of course, receptionist Noel Garcia's tragic death at the end of this episode, I would say, was the perfect way to end it, because it showed how workplaces suffered deaths and bereavements. But even though Noel died, 5 minutes later, they were preparing to deal with incoming patients. And it kind of showed that in an ED, they can grieve, but they also have to keep going. They keep having to support people and save lives. This COVID episode was very special. I've seen other programmes, not to mention Holby City, do COVID episodes, but I think Casualty's one was the best, because it just felt like so much attention had been put into it, plus the acting was another level. Before I say what my number one is, I just wanted to give some honourable mentions. These are episodes which didn't make the list, but part of me wishes that they had. The first one is #Holby Riots. This was the concluding two-parter to Series 26, and I remember this being heavily marketed. Obviously 2012 was the time of the Olympics, but all I was concerned about was this #Holby Riots episode. A massive riot occurs in Holby and all of the characters involved. Nick Jordan's girlfriend is stabbed, and a lot of the second part is Nick trying to find her throughout this basically a city in chaos and try and save her life. It was a very intense episode, has you on the edge of your seat, as I've said for a lot of these episodes, and I really enjoyed these episodes. You felt like a lot of work had been put into them. Series 33, Episode 1, which was a massive motorway pile-up, which eventually leads to a tanker explosion. Really strong episode. The stunt work was impressive. It's also a great character episode for paramedic Ian Dean, because obviously this is the start of his mental health storyline, especially as his colleague Sam Nichols dies at the end of this episode, which was just such a tragic way to end such an intense episode. And Duffy's death episode. Duffy, an original character, she'd been suffering with vascular dementia, and her death was done really well, especially that final scene when she's kind of carried out of the department on a trolley, and you can see all the staff kind of lining up, kind of saluting this legendary character, and I just thought that was a really special scene. Plus, Derek Thompson was really good as an actor in this episode as Charlie. So yeah, I've always loved Duffy's death. I thought it was done really well. And number one, I have chosen Next of Kin, which is series 26, episodes 15 and 16. It's a two-parter, final Casualty episodes set in Bristol. And of course, these are the famous episodes in which Holby's emergency department is blown up. And this episode is just intense. I have a soft spot for fire episodes, so this episode really appeals to me for those reasons. And of course, so many characters are in trouble. You have Ruth and Jay in the department. You have Zoe and Dylan trying to save a patient's life in resus while the ED is literally burning down around them. You have Charlie and Nick Jordan and all the other characters outside trying to rescue patients who've been disrupted by this fire. It's just an amazing episode. It is intense. I mean, I've seen it, you know, I would say at least 50 times. And even now, I will be sitting there like, oh my God, I hope they survive. I already know the outcome. But the episode still fires up emotions in me, which is why you know it's a really special episode. And I also like the ending of this episode. We see Ruth and Jay, who've had an on and off relationship for the last couple of series, decide to leave the ED. Obviously, Ruth just discovered she was pregnant with Jay's baby, and they decide after the fire that they're going to leave and start a new life. They're going to start afresh. And I just really like that exit, because with a lot of these intense episodes, they usually end with quite a tragic ending, but this one is different because Ruth and Jay get their happily ever after, which I really like, because despite all of the destruction and carnage which these episodes bring, you've also got a very warm-hearted ending, so that's really nice to see. Plus, I love the final scene where you see Charlie and Nick Jordan just looking over the rubble which used to be the ED, and they're just like, it'll be fine, we'll rebuild, you know, it'll be all right. I don't know why, that scene always makes me laugh. So, out of all the Casualty episodes I have seen, Next of Kin is my personal favourite. So thanks for watching, guys. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe in order to receive great and maybe even improved quality content in the future. Now, of course, this was my personal ranking. I'm very biased, and as you can see, quite a bit of this was based on nostalgia, because obviously I grew up with a lot of these episodes, so they're ones which always stick in my head. But I would love to hear you guys' suggestions. If you think I've missed out any episodes, please feel free to comment down below, because I'd love to hear what episodes you guys like, especially if they're ones I haven't seen before, because I might go and check them out. So thanks for watching this video once again, and I will see you in another one. See ya!